Education is a fundamental right that should be enjoyed equally by all people. There are still many vulnerable children around the world who are unable to access education due to the impact of poverty, war, or the COVID-19 pandemic. Based on Japan's past experiences in education, JICA has conducted education cooperation for over 150 developing countries since the 1960s to date. Let's look back at its evolution. Japan's development cooperation has emphasized human resources development from the beginning, based on the idea that developing people is the foundation of developing countries. In addition to the higher education and technical and vocational education and training sectors, basic education cooperation has started from the 1960s, as many JICA overseas cooperation volunteers have been dispatched to schools in developing countries. Japan's basic education cooperation gathered momentum in the 1990s. Triggered by the 1990 World Conference on Education for All, global development changed course significantly, shifting toward an emphasis on basic education. In response to this international trend, JICA expanded its basic education cooperation, launching a series of projects in fields where Japan has extensive experience, such as science and mathematics education, teacher development and training, and construction of school facilities. In the 2000s, the school enrollment rate improved in developing countries, but supporting education for regions and individuals who were left behind while others developed became a key issue. It was also at this time that the concept of human security, which prioritizes the happiness and dignity of individuals in vulnerable situations, became the key pillar of Japan's aid policy. In this context, JICA launched the School for All project to improve education in rural areas of sub-Saharan Africa, and education support projects for vulnerable individuals such as girls, children with disabilities, and children in post-conflict and post-disaster regions. Since the 1990s, issues to address have increased and have been more challenging. But thanks to the specialized knowledge of education development accumulated to date and expanded partnerships with international organizations, many positive results have been achieved. Recently, private sector companies have been active in basic education cooperation. Private funding and expertise play an important role in the development of developing countries. Japanese companies that develop textbook and learning material, private educational institutions, digital learning material companies, and others are involved in JICA's basic education cooperation projects as well. Meanwhile, in Japan, the globalization of education is a growing issue with the increase of culturally and linguistically diverse children. JICA is striving to return the accumulated expertise of education cooperation to resolve issues in Japan and realize a multicultural and inclusive community. Drawing on Japan's own experiences in education, JICA has developed basic education cooperation that addresses changes in global development and the new educational development needs of developing countries. Collaboration with Japanese civil society, private companies, and international organizations is also a feature of JICA's basic education cooperation. Applying Japan's extensive education development experience and human resources to the resolution of issues in developing countries, while collaborating with those countries and international organizations, will be important in the future as well. Now, let's look at what kind of educational issues exist. More than 260 million children and youth worldwide are still out of school. Additionally, it is reported that more than 610 million children in school have not reached the minimum proficiency level in literacy and numeracy. There are children who are not receiving an education due to issues such as poverty, gender, disability, conflict, ethnicity, language, and urban-rural disparities. There is also the issue known as the learning crisis, where people enter adulthood without acquiring basic academic skills. Goal 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs) is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. With the aim of achieving this SDG, JICA formulated its Global Agenda for Education in 2021 as part of its cooperation strategies for global issues. This sets JICA's own objectives for contributing to achieving SDG 4 with 2030 as the target. JICA is working to deliver quality education for 20 million children in partnership with other development partners, NGOs, universities, private companies, and the like. JICA has 3 approaches in basic education cooperation. The first is to improve learning through the development of textbooks and learning materials. The second is to promote collaboration between local communities and schools. And the third is to provide education that leaves no one behind. Let's look at each of these approaches. The first is to improve learning through the development of textbooks and learning materials. In developing countries, there are still many children who have not achieved the minimum proficiency level in literacy and numeracy. Possible reasons for this include, for example, learning content that is not suited to children's circumstances, content that does not engage students' interest, and inconsistency in the content of textbooks and learning materials. Another reason is that many classes focus on memorization and involve one-way lectures by the teacher, with children having little time to think for themselves and engage in learning. It is therefore important to create an environment where children are able to learn in a proactive, continuous manner through class improvements based on developing high-quality textbooks and learning materials, as well as mutual learning among teachers. Specifically, that means developing consistent, appropriately structured curriculums and textbooks, and introducing quality learning materials, as well as establishing an environment that enables the PDCA cycle to be reliably implemented so that teachers can improve classes in the classroom. These enable learning improvement suited to each individual child. JICA also incorporates the PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle into both education policy and classrooms. At the policy level, a cycle to make improvements is implemented in Japan as follows. Children's learning is assessed through national assessment, and feedback is then provided on education policies, which is reflected in those policies, revisions to curriculums and learning materials, and teacher development and training, etc. At the classroom level, daily classes are assessed, feedback is provided on class plans, and class plans are implemented to improve teachers' own practices and promote independent learning, leading to the implementation of improved classes. JICA incorporated this PDCA cycle into a project in El Salvador. The Esmante project for the improvement of mathematics teaching in El Salvador developed easy-to-use teacher's guides, textbooks, and workbooks at schools, distributed them nationwide, and worked to improve classes through textbooks and mutual learning among teachers. As a result, academic performance relative to the group average in mathematics improved for second-grade primary school students. This learning outcome has been academically verified. Due to the learning outcome being validated, the El Salvador Ministry of Education has created a cyclical learning improvement structure. It regularly conducts surveys of children's academic ability and reflects the findings and revisions to the curriculum and textbooks while also aiming to have teachers make improvements to classes. The second is to promote collaboration between local communities and schools. Since the 1990s, governments in sub-Saharan Africa have made primary education free with the aim of improving enrollment rates, as well as introducing a system involving subsidies to schools and school management committees to receive them. However, due to a lack of government budget and the belief in many countries that school is for wealthy people, village authorities often handled school management, and there was a lack of transparency. So community members were not interested in being actively involved in school management. As a result, improvements were not made to the school education environment, and the system did not lead to improved enrollment rates and academic ability. In light of these circumstances, JICA has supported an approach promoting educational improvement through collaboration with communities, which involves community members along with government and teachers. Known as School for All, this cooperation project has expanded to mainly French-speaking African countries since it was launched in Niger in 2004. As of March 2023, it had been deployed at over 70,000 schools in 10 African countries. Let's take a look at changes in basic academic skills in the graph using Niger and Madagascar as examples, where the School for All project has been implemented to 1 million children. We measured children's ability to perform the 4 basic arithmetic operations and their reading and writing skills before and after extracurricular remedial classes conducted by school management committees for several months in each country. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division were each tested. In both countries, the proportion of children capable of performing the 4 basic arithmetic operations increased by an average of around 24 percentage points. The project is now expanding to English-speaking African countries as well, and there are plans to deploy it in regions outside of Africa. The third is to provide education that leaves no one behind. The global primary education enrollment rate is around 90%, but there are still many children who are unable to attend school, with the remaining 10%, including girls, children with disabilities, and refugee children from conflicts. In Pakistan in particular, there are over 23 million out-of-school children, youth, and adults, the majority of whom are females. Accordingly, JICA supports education not only for public schools, but also for non-formal education that provides learning sites for children and youth who do not attend school for reasons such as being too far from school or having to work during the daytime. Meanwhile, in Mongolia, there are various circumstances that lead to children with disabilities not attending school, such as not being able to receive the required developmental support even though they have a disability, or schools lacking readiness to accept them. JICA is therefore supporting the construction of schools equipped with facilities that facilitate learning for children with disabilities and the realization of inclusive education that enables children to learn according to the degree of their disabilities. When aiming to improve education so no one is left behind, it is not always possible to address school attendance issues for vulnerable populations with a single approach, given the variety of underlying factors. JICA is therefore striving to ensure that vulnerable children are not left behind in its other basic education cooperation activities as well. Along with these 3 approaches, JICA is supporting pre-primary education for infants, advocating for improving competencies for living, life skills, non-cognitive skills, etc., and using learning materials for culturally and linguistically diverse children living in Japan. Through activities such as these, JICA is supporting the promotion of quality education. It is also pursuing the sharing of experience and knowledge by facilitating interaction with international and domestic partners, developing and developed countries.